Welcome everybody to another episode of Fantasy News. I am your disheveled goblin host Daniel Greene, and today we are going to be kicking it off with a major news update when it comes to the future of you consuming content in general within your life. And that is because a major manga publisher has joined the fight taking on AI and its mass use to steal from artists, with headlines reading like, One Piece publisher Shueisha vows appropriate and strict measures against OpenAI copyright infringement. And this is in regard specifically with the proliferation of Sora 2. In a press release put out on October 31st, the statement read, This fall, with the release of new generative AI service, OpenAI's Sora 2, a massive number of videos resembling famous content appeared online. These videos, which infringe upon the copyrights of anime and characters, are generated based on AI training. While the evolution of generative AI should be welcomed for enabling more people to share in the joy of creation and enjoy creative works,
I'm afraid I disagree.
It must not be built upon trampling the dignity of creators who poured their heart and souls into their work or infringing on the rights of many. And yeah, this is just adding to an ever-growing op list that OpenAI and its ilk are having to now contend with. Granted, the people who are fighting them certainly have an uphill battle due to the money machine that AI has become, which I would debate is a gargantuan bubble from a lot of the information I have seen out there. But people tend to defend their bubble because of how much they've sunken their own value into it. Japan has already implemented some legislation against the use of AI, but whether that is going to be effective in the long term, especially as AI tools become internationally used, is yet to be seen. Just another interesting chapter mark in the ongoing legal battle that will decide our long-term interaction with AI-generated art. How fun. The reason I'm starting off with this story is it carries us oh so nicely into our next one, which then leads us into our next, and it's kind of a nice flow of tangentially related topics. But we have also seen George R.R. Martin score a success in his ongoing legal battle, well, one he's a part of, against artificial intelligence. And that is because a judge has agreed that a cohort of authors can continue with their lawsuit against OpenAI. And this is with two new theories of infringement, with the plaintiffs advancing three different arguments. The first is that the training of AI models on copyrighted books constitutes infringement, a common theory that most creators brought when the first wave of lawsuits were filed. The other relates to a newer argument over the practice of pirating books from shadow libraries that weren't used for training. The last is that answers generated by ChatGPT are substantially similar to the books they're trained on. And this is much more in the vein of the lawsuit we actually saw Anthropic already lose and agree to pay $1.5 billion for in a payout. These are going to continue to rain down as in recent years, more and more we're discovering that a whole bunch of tech giants just decided that stealing books en masse or ignoring copyright laws were just a part of doing business to get going in this field. And I'm just hoping that this cost of doing business we saw them openly talk about, knowing they were infringing on copyright when it came to especially the Facebook debacle, ends up being exponentially higher than they initially planned. So that way there's actually, some justice dealt. But that was all negative and sad. Let's do some quickie good time news to brush off that dust. The actor who played Bran Stark in all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, Isaac Wright, officially got hitched. He's 26 for those curious. Congrats to him, and I hope they find a happily ever after. That's far more in like the positive fairy tale leaning of fantasy than in the dark era he helped usher in. Before we get into the next news story though, I'm happy to say that the uncensored version, the YouTube not friendly version I should say, because there's like some stuff I'm still squeezing through, anyway, of the Red Rising summary is available on Patreon right now for just $1. And that, yes, is the next series we will be summarizing here on the channel. So if you'd like to go check that one out, just jump on over to Patreon and you can see me do all the swears and talk about the graphic stuff in detail, without worrying about Papa YouTube thinking we're all babies here, even though there is YouTube for kids, and I, for some reason, still have to make content approachable for kids. It's a strange system. I don't understand it either. But we've also had some major awards giving out, and that is because the World Fantasy Awards have announced their winners. The contenders for Best Novel were The Foxwife, The Bogwife, The Bright Sword, and The Wings Upon Her Back. And the winner was The Tainted Cup, which made me think, didn't that come out like 2 years ago? But then I looked into it and it does qualify, but also time's an illusion. I'm going to use this as an excuse to vomit my existential crisis on you because this has been sitting in my head for far too long and no one's been able to tell me why I'm wrong, and it's starting to freak me out because I don't believe in free will right now and I want to believe in free will. So, there was a Big Bang. From what we know, it started at a point. This is related to time not being linear, by the way, which is true. Okay, now, everything we see happens expanding out from this point. It's why you can look in any direction in space and see the past, but you'll never see the future, because everything from where we are is going to be further in the past eventually by the time it gets back to us. Hence why when you look through a telescope and you see like a super far off distant galaxy, you're seeing how it was a long time ago, not as it is now. Great. Which means if you rewound time all the way back to when that galaxy we were looking at was exactly at that point and at that time, and then hit play going forward, it would do exactly as it did before. You're able to see this. It has not done anything different. It will not do anything different. Follow me here. Now, if we rewind all the way back to the beginning where the Big Bang happened and then hit play forward again, all of the things would happen in the same order: dinosaurs extinct, the Apollo mission blowing up, to be exactly where it should be when that same time happens in the future. But again, time's not linear, which makes this all freaky. So I wouldn't do anything different if we rewound time back to when the Big Bang happened and set it off again, because everything that's ever happened as a result of the Big Bang is just particles bouncing in the way that they were going to always bounce because of the physics of that explosion. And so then I would end up existing as this solid point, which means if you pull out to the fifth dimension and you look at time as an observable thing, there would just be like this perfect shape cube of all that is or will be in our universe observable, and nothing I can do will ever change anything because it's already ordained to happen and have happened. Free will isn't real. Why am I wrong? Someone tell me, please, dear God, why I'm wrong. I don't know, I noticed it, you did too. If you'd like to see all the rest of the awards given out and who won, check it out in the links down below. In some quickie news, John Gwynne posted this to Twitter: badass. First book in a new series from the master of Nordic fantasy appears to be complete. And then if you're a Dresden Files fan and looking forward to the release of the next book, 12 Months, there is a sneak peek chapter 1 that if you'd like, I could actually read for you right now. I don't need to read it from the website. I could just read it from the copy they sent me early. Nah, I probably, you don't want to sit here and just have me read a full chapter to you. But if you want to check out the first chapter, linked down below as well. And if you'd like to post any news stories to see covered here in the next week of fantasy news, all you have to do is join the Discord server, pop into the fantasy news channel, and post articles you want to see discussed, and I will consider them. I can't promise more than that, because a lot of stuff's posted there. And then Grimdark Magazine had an exciting announcement about who? About Grimdark Magazine. And that is because they have acquired the world rights to a new C.L. Clarke novella. Best known for her Magic of the Lost trilogy, this novella is about a young woman who wants to become a monster slayer for fame, fortune, and her love of her sweetheart. When she fails to win her apprenticeship, she goes back home with her tail between her legs, only to find monsters are waiting, and you can't fight monsters with love. And they ended their quote that they sent with the making of a monster, ... Slayer. Because, Buffy. Probably the most famous monster slayer ever? I can't. Well, Van Helsing. Okay, that's kind of unfair. A Kickstarter is launching for Joseph Abercrombie, as he is going to be bringing us the first law signed and personalized by the author himself, advertised with a quote saying, "You can never have too many signed editions. From Logan Ninefingers, probably." And that made me chortle. Speaking of fundraising, though, it's so cool to see that we are seeing a bookish community come together and start Book Lovers Food Drive, With the government shutdown in effect, 42 million Americans face immediate loss of their SNAP benefits in at least 25 states. And as a response to that, already over $7,000 have been raised, rocketing towards a goal of $10K, with a claim that every $1 donated equals 10 meals. And so if you'd like to contribute to this worthy cause, it's just linked down in the description. They always are down there. I don't need to keep clarifying, but it feels like I should. And then we got a crazy last second update from China Miéville, believe it or not, who is releasing his first adult novel, solo authored in 20 years, called The Ruse, and it is going to be released by Del Rey in the United States in September of 2026. Miéville said, "I've been working on The Ruse for considerably more than half of my adult life. Its release feels monumental, exhilarating, terrifying, defining for me." And the assistant editor at Picador, their European publisher, said, "At once thrilling, tender, illuminating, and eerie, The Ruse is astonishingly brilliant, the result of a master craftsman owning their skills over decades. It's so multitudinous that readers will be poring over its secrets and uncovering its mysteries for years to come. We are so proud to be China's publisher, and we can't wait for his fans to get their hands on The Ruse next September." And if this was for anyone but China Miéville, I would go, that's just like a crazy overhype of a book, but it's China Miéville, and working on it for 20 years it's going to be something. That's what we can say for sure. It'll probably make people uncomfortable. It will have a lot of different layers to it, and it will be polarizing. All three of those predictions I am immensely confident in. But have you ever been interested in a fantasy book about an unwinnable war? I'm excited to say that there's actually one happening right now here in the real world. And that is because Netflix and other major streamers, including Crunchyroll, are trying to crack down on piracy. And isn't that adorable? What's really interesting to me is if you look into the actual rates of piracy over the years, there was a substantial drop off for many years, and then streaming service started to suck, and then pirating became more common once again. It's almost like they could provide a better product and maybe not worry just as much about getting huge bonuses and ever-ending growth profits. So yeah, they've targeted a whole bunch of websites. Some of them are taken down, and soon a bunch more will pop back up, and we'll continue on this fun game of never-ending whack-a-mole. Huzzah! But in some quickie news, there's going to be a kaiju book put out, contributed to by a bunch of famous authors over by Titan Books, with 25 original tales. And this is the cover. I like it a lot. Right in that same vein, we also had the same creator behind Godzilla -1 announcing a new Godzilla project titled Godzilla -0. And I immediately had the same thought that the top comment is, does that mean the third one's going to be Godzilla +1? And is it going to be a rom-com? And would you believe it? Amazon, the game studio, has decided to cancel their Lord of the Rings MMORPG. And I know what you're thinking, they already did, and I want you to know they brought it back, and then they canceled it again. Because we're in the era of corporate incompetence. Sorry, let's keep it more positive. I'm reeling it in. Reeling it! I know I can be a lot. I'm a little too much sometimes, and that's why I've decided to tag in help, not with myself, with other people. I wanted to actually for a while get this project done, but I hadn't had the time. And so I called my fantasy news deputies, Austin and Rich, to see if they would like to deep dive what Game of Thrones projects that we've covered, the litany of them over the years here on Fantasy News, are still in development, possibly happening, or quietly canceled. And so now I would like to cut to my two lovely gentlemen as they go through and tell you the tale of every single Game of Thrones project you remember hearing a headline about and going, oh yeah, that sounds...
Thanks, Daniel, for having us on for this little special segment on the current status of all Game of Thrones spin-offs. We're going to break it down into three categories here. First is all canceled projects, officially canceled, not happening. Second is still in development. Who knows? Details are a little murky, but they may actually happen. They're up in the air. Third is they're definitely coming. So we're going to break it down first with the canceled.
Yes.
Works? Awesome. Let's start us off.
These are definitely canceled Game of Thrones spinoffs. They were throwing a bunch of ideas at the wall. HBO, after the success of Game of Thrones, was saying, oh my God, let's do more of this. And one of the first ones announced in 2017 was Blood Moon. HBO canceled Blood Moon in 2019 when it was announced, 2017, so it only lasted a couple of years, and that was after spending $30 million on its pilot episode. HBO's content chief explained that it was a hard project because George R. R. Martin had only written about 8 lines of text for the era that the show was set in, so a lot more had to be invented. And, we saw how they did with inventing stuff in season 8. So, maybe we don't do that. So, HBO's chief content officer, Casey Bloy, said, it required a lot more invention. It was high risk, high reward. There wasn't anything glaringly wrong with it. Development and pilots are hard. And then Robert Greenblatt, the then chairman of HBO's parent company, Warner Media, said, I quote, it wasn't unwatchable or horrible or anything, which is always promising, Rich.
Yeah, that's a low bar. Okay.
But continued to say, it was very well produced and looked extraordinary, but it didn't take me to the same place the original series. It didn't have the depth and richness that the original series pilot did. Now, George R. R. Martin, who never got to see the pilot, said, I quote, Blood Moon was a very difficult assignment. We're dealing with a much more primitive people. There were no dragons yet. A lot of the pilot revolved around a wedding of a southern house to a northern house, and it got into the whole history of White Walkers. So Blood Moon, goodbye, see you later.
If this was also under a similar name, then The Long Night was one of the names drafted out. So if you've remembered The Long Night, it was also wrapped into Blood Moon. So next one is Empire of Ash. This is definitely canceled. It was announced in October 2017. This would have followed the downfall of the Valyrian Freehold, which was the most powerful empire ever seen in the world of Game of Thrones. It would have chronicled the decline of the Freehold in its final years, leading to the fabled Doom of Valyria, an intense volcanic event that turned the Freehold's homeland into a blackened and uninhabitable wasteland. Only the Targaryens escaped.
And then we know what happens after that.
Yes. But this series apparently got pretty far with an actual assembled writing team, but ultimately HBO passed on the project, leaving it the only mention of the Doom of Valyria is briefly mentioned in Game of Thrones.
Now, the biggest show that had the most buzz that was canceled, you might have heard of it, was Snow, which was the Jon Snow sequel. People were a little bit excited for, saying, ooh, do we get more of Jon Snow's story? This was announced in February 2022 and canceled. And ultimately, here's what Kit Harington, the actor that played Jon Snow, said. He said, what I can tell you is it was HBO that came to me and said, would you consider this? My first reaction was no. And then I thought there could be an interesting and important story about the soldier after the war. I felt that there might be something left to say and a story left to tell in a pretty limited way. We spent a couple years back and forth developing it, and it didn't, nothing got us excited enough. In the end, I kind of backed out and said, I think if we push this any further and keep developing it, we could end up with something that's not good, and that's the last thing we all want. Jon Snow said, glaring at the D&D as he crumpled up the papers of the script. Am I sounding bitter? No. What's the next show, Rich?
Next one is Flea Bottom. This was announced in March of 2021. Its current status is canceled. This would have been a prequel focusing on a weird choice, given the show's tendency to focus on the continent continent events. This would have been focusing on the real smaller, the common side of the people. However, in 2021, it was officially canceled by HBO, noted as it was just really far out there. It was of the shows announced, it was the most furthest removed and most likely to be canceled anyway. So,
and then the last one we have here is The Seven ? Because this one was kind of untitled. There was just an idea thrown out there that got some buzz where people know, if you follow Game of Thrones, the Faith of the Seven is one of the major religions in Game of Thrones. It's mentioned frequently, and there was this far-fetched idea to have these 7 gods roaming in the world and showing how the faiths sprouted up in Game of Thrones. So it would have had the gods. It would have been something. We really don't know too much about it. This one didn't go as far as the other ones, but figured it was worth mentioning before we finally get to the series that have been announced that aren't canceled yet and have some potential.
Also, side tangent, season 2 of Telltale Games, Game of Thrones Telltale Games, was also canceled due to rights issues.
Oh.
That's not in the notes.
Oh.
I just wanted to add that in. That was also canceled.
There's another one that's canceled. Okay.
Just wanted to.
It's so much to keep track of. That's why we're here trying to update people and be like, oh, this was informative for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now we're on to the maybe up in the air. Hasn't been officially canceled yet. First on the list is The Sea Snake or The Nine Voyages. This is an animation project that was announced in October 2017, along with a big other host of a bunch of projects. This is apparently still in the works, which is great. I like animation, so let's get some more here. Apparently, Martin explained that because the exploits of Corlys Valerian in House of the Dragon takes place mostly aboard a ship at sea and would feature different ports each week. Budgetary constraints would likely have made the live-action version prohibitively expensive. So that is still on the way as far as we are aware.
The next one we have is 10,000 Ships. This is interesting because this show was announced in October 2017, then scrapped in 2022. However, in 2024, a new pilot was written for it, and it looks like it could be a thing again. So it's in limbo, but also we haven't had an update in years. So this is in a territory of I don't know. It's murky, but look out for any information on 10,000 Ships. That'll be there.
Last update was in June of 2024.
Yep.
By George R. R. Martin himself. So the next one is The Golden Empire.
Another animation.
This is still in early development. The last update was in 2022, basically saying it's still in the works. This would have been it's a working title for a series set in the Golden Empire of Yi, a fictional land in far east of Essos. The historical region that predates the main Game of Thrones timeline, focusing on the once and powerful empire known as the Great Empire of the Dawn. So this is still in the works. Seems pretty likely. This has had several different updates over the years, but then again, last one was in 2022.
And then we have, this is exciting. It's another animation project titled Untitled.
I have a few details on this. Basically, in December of 2023, in George R. R. Martin's blog post, he was mentioning several different animation series that are currently in the works. The animation, he basically said, hey, there's 2 additional original animations besides the 9 Voyages, and one was presumably the Golden Empire that was still in works, but that left 1 additional original animation work unaccounted for. So it is now listed as the Untitled. He basically said that on the docket, there are 3 projects. We know of 2 of them. There is a 3rd apparently in the works. I have no further updates other than that.
Untitled, we'll see.
Untitled, I have no idea.
And then we have Aegon's Conquest, and this was announced in April 2023. This would be following Aegon the Conqueror as he takes over Westeros, and happens that this is the predecessor, one of the predecessors to the series events that happen in Game of Thrones, where we start in a Game of Thrones. And this would be probably, I'm just conjecturing here, this would probably be one of the more likely projects, seeing that House of the Dragon has the success it has. This feels like a natural progression to show more of the Targaryen stuff because people love watching the Targaryen politicking. So Aegon's Conquest, seeing how did Aegon conquer Westeros, that's the story of this. And I think, I'm just guessing it's more likely, but we have about the same information as the rest of these, as in it's in early development. So
as far as internet sleuths go, Aegon's Conquest seems one of the most likely out of all these. Next one is a little bit of a fun one here. It's a stage play titled Harrenhal. This was announced in December, or at least it was mentioned in December 2023 that it was still in the works. This is preceding Robert's Rebellion involving a tournament that was held at Harrenhal. Any further details could be spoilers. If you know that, you know what I'm talking about. It involves that story. But I'm trying to avoid spoilers. Anyway, this is up in the air. It was last mentioned. There's ticket sales that you could pre-order. It's on a page. Who knows? I thought it was funny that there's a stage play.
We have stage plays, animations, live action. We just need musicals. Game of Thrones, the musical. There is a Lord of the Rings, the musical, and it's both the best and worst thing I've ever seen. Check it out. It's very funny. Okay, now we have this is the last one in the possible projects. Game of Thrones, the movie. Game of Thrones movie, which in October 31st, just last year, 2024, Hollywood Reporter says that the CEO of HBO announced that a movie is in development. We do not know particularly what the movie will cover. There's some guesses out there, but we have no other announcements other than some type of movie. And I'm going to guess here as well and say I think they will make some sort of movie.
Yeah.
This one does seem to have, especially when the CEO of HBO is announcing that, seems to have more of a push. And also, since there hasn't been a movie yet, I'd expect to see Game of Thrones on the big screen in some way.
Yeah. So now we're on to the actually coming list.
100%.
100%. This is a much shorter list.
There's only two things.
There's two things. First one on the definitely happening list is A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. This was announced in January of 2021, but then subsequent delays, writer strikes, all these different things happened. But it is now slated for a 2026 release. This is based on the novellas by George R. R. Martin that are collectively known as Tales of Dunk and Egg. So this series follows Sir Duncan the Tall and his young squire Aegon, set after House of the Dragon, nearly a century before Game of Thrones. This series focuses on the small folk left to pick up the pieces of wars raged for glory and power by the Westeros elite.
And since there's source material for this, I see why they are developing it and having the show come out.
And complete source material, not a couple lines here and there. So,
well, also that's why the other release that we have is House of the Dragon, which you all know season 1 and 2 has been out. Season 3 and 4 will be released. It will conclude with season 4. However, season 3, which is coming out next, is to come summer of 2026. The current guess is around June. And if anybody knows House of the Dragon, it's the story of the Targaryens, the civil war between the Targaryen houses as King Viserys I, his children are battling for the Iron Throne, based on the source material Fire and Blood from George R. R. Martin. So yes, that's what we definitely have. I hope that we summarized in completion what's canceled, what has been canned, what's possible, what is actually happening. Are you less confused? Hopefully. Hopefully we helped.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel, and back to you.
But this has just been your latest episode of Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Yes, Red Rising is available right now for you to see uncensored on the platform. And for everyone who's fine with just getting what's safe and comfortable here on YouTube, there's going to be the full version here as well, published Thursday this week. Have a good one, y'all. Bye!